7 generations of my family have lived in this town. From Dave Cost Sr., which was the first white person on this plantation, which was called Hinckley Township then. And he had a farm on the North Shore of Big Lake. And it went down from his daughter to her daughter, to her daughter, to her daughter, to her daughter, to my grandmother. And they have always lived in Hinckley Township. Some, and on Tough End here, there's 4 generations that have lived on Tough End. From my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my father, me, and my son would be in the 5th.
And the original Cass settlement was in the 1820s, wasn't it?
Well, it's debatable when he came. It was between 1812 and 1817 that he started the farm. And whether he was in Canada, but how he got there I never could figure out, because he was born in New Hampshire. He was working in a brick place, making bricks, and I think the War of 1812 got him on this side of the border. And then he didn't like it on this side of the border, so we went back. And he married a girl, Eleanor Marsh was her name. And she worked in the household of the general that was the head of the British Army in St. Stephen, which wasn't St. Stephen then. So then they moved to the North Shore of Big Lake, and that was how the family started here. And Grammy Hawkins, that's my great-grandmother, was the first elected female person in the plantation. And she was elected as chairperson for the school board because she wanted a school out in Cassville, which she got. And she got $20 to buy books for the school. And it's in the town records.
When was that, Sophie? What about when?
I can't, it was early 1900s. I can't remember right now the dates. Right. I have it, but I don't remember it. And that school went for about 20 years and educated the boys, not necessarily the girls. And Grammy said that when her brothers would come home from school, she would make them sit down and teach her what they learned in school that day. And their mother used to do the same thing. So Grammy was taught by her brothers, and she taught herself to read and write. And Grammy could read Old English. She had a book of Shakespeare's by E.K. Chambers from Scotland. Now, whether it was part of her husband's family or not, I don't know. Because I can't go back that far.
Right.
Because, I don't know, they were outlaws, I imagine. But anyhow, she used to read that to me. And I'd go home and I'd tell my mother, Grammy read me this today, and I'd repeat what Grammy read me. And my mother would look at me and she'd say, speak English. I said, well, Grammy said it was English. My mother said, no, it's not English. So that was a thing in growing up. And Grammy she was very old and very used up from working hard and whatnot. And she would sit and tell me stories. Hours on hours she'd tell me about her being a little girl and where they lived and what they did, and you know, her brothers, one of her brothers was the architect for a Mason Hall in Baltimore, Maryland. You know, he went to school maybe 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
But he went to college and got to be an architect. Another one was an electrician that worked in Portsmouth, I think. I can't remember right now.
Okay.
But, I mean, they were not unintelligent people. They just lacked education. But when they got a chance for an education, they took it.
Yeah.
And that was drummed into our heads. Whether it's a formal education or a you learn it education, you will get an education. You know, you will learn things that you know, and then you learn things that other people know. And then when you go, you'll be ready to go. You know, my father used to say, you put a city person in Grand Lake Stream, they'll last a month. You put a Grand Lake Stream in the city, they'll last forever. Growing up on this street, there was 32 kids. All war babies, all 41, 42, 43, and 44. And we lived in the woods. You know, the big hill where Laura and Steve Shaver's house is, we had a village up there. We had teepees that we cut boughs every spring. We cut boughs and replaced the old ones. We had boards that we found in people's dumps, dishes we found in people's dumps. You know, it was just every kid on the street played up there. We played Cowboys and Indians, we played Tarzan, we played house, we played whatever. But none of the parents worried because we were all together, you know, and we had a pile of rocks, and if somebody whistled and said, over there, we'd pick up a rock and we'd heave it in the woods. Nobody spied on us. And there was one guy that used to love to come up there and stand in the woods and spy on us. He didn't have any kids. He just liked to spy on us. So we'd put the rocks to him. And he didn't come after that, you know. But it was the outdoor part of our lives, which was a major part of it. We knew what the trees were. We knew what the berries were. We knew what the flowers were, because our parents taught us that. The in-house part of my childhood was completely different from the outhouse part. I don't mean an outhouse, but out of the house.
Right.
In-house was very strict. It was said once and only once, you will do the best in school that you possibly can, and then some more. You will learn everything that you can from anybody that you can learn anything from. My mother got up in the morning at 3:30, 4 o'clock and wrote until breakfast time. She got breakfast. My room was taken care of before I went to school, from the time that we lived in the little house till the time we moved into the big house. My bedroom was spotless, or it wasn't there. And if I didn't do what was right, it went out the window. And I come home one day because I had forgotten to make my bed in the morning, and it was on the front lawn, and it was raining. So I had to take all my bedding in, wash it, hang it on the line, and I didn't have any bedding on my bed that night because it was wet. But I never forgot to make my bed again. But most kids, I didn't go to kindergarten. I didn't go to the 4th grade. And I didn't go to the freshman. It was interesting because in one room there was 4 grades. And if you were interested, like nosy me, I didn't give a damn what the 2nd grade did. I wanted to know what the 4th grade did. You know, and when we were a freshman, supposedly, we had a teacher that had just graduated from the university, and he had all his tests. So he wanted to know what we knew in English. So he gave us the test that he had his last year at the University of Maine, and every one of us passed it. And he said, "Who cheated on this test?" And nobody cheated on the test. We just had Lila McKelvey, Mr. Day, Pip, and oh, damn, it's gone. But those are the teachers that we had. Oh, Mr. Honeywell. That taught what you were supposed to have been taught, basics. And once you learn the basics, the rest of it's a breeze, you know. And we had a damn good education. Then we went to Woodland, and I can honestly say I had 2 interesting classes in 3 years that I was in Woodland. The rest of them was so boring. Oh my God. I hated high school. I hated it. We had one ex-college professor that taught English, and he loved Chaucer, and I loved Chaucer, and it was such a good, that was my senior year. It was amazing to me to learn from a professor that knew what Chaucer was all about, and he always called me the baker with a pimple on the nose. And it was just, oh, it was so exciting to me to learn something that I didn't know.
Right.
But then it was, the kids all went off. Most of the kids went to higher education. I got a scholarship, which I didn't use. I got married and had a son, and then decided I didn't want to be married anymore. So then I went to Massachusetts and got a job at Raytheon Electronics and went to Brandeis. And it was just a fluke all the way. I applied and didn't get in to Brandeis. My aunt worked for Mr. Jake Grossman. Of course, Jake Grossman donated half of Brandeis University.
Yeah.
So she mentioned it to him, not meaning anything. You know, she just was, they was talking about family, and she said, my niece just denied from Brandeis. He says, what do you mean? Where's she from? Grand Lake Street. Why didn't she get in? You know, the whole works. Well, I got a letter from Brandeis saying that I could be a provisional student. So I took my 4 courses, base courses that I needed for whatever I had planned on doing. And the lowest I got was 3.8. So then I wasn't a provisional anymore. So I went there off and on for, 5 years. Yeah. And I always kept changing subjects, so I never got a degree.
A little about how the town, operated when you were a kid in terms of its organization and the things that everybody did in the community.
Well, as we still are, we're a plantation. We are a town meeting form of government, and every officer except the school board members have 1-year terms. And it's been that way from the beginning. Town meeting always was the last Monday in March because the books closed April 1st, and that gave 90 days to get the tax bills in the mail, which is law, I think. So when they set up the town originally, it was just to organize after the land changed hands and whatnot after the cannon. And then it was incorporated as a tax collecting plantation, which my understanding is that the plantation was given permission by the Maine state legislature to collect taxes on its residents for the use of the residents in the plantation. And when I was a kid, town meeting day was a holiday. The women had a supper or a dinner at the Circle Building. We got out of school at noontime. We went to the Circle Building for lunch. Sometimes the town meeting took all day. There was very few articles compared to what it is now. Maybe 30 articles sometimes. But they were very conservative on the money they spent and why they spent it. And there was never a problem with school. They always spent money on schools. The roads sometimes, but people who let the cows run, they got really talked to. Not so much with the chickens, because you could borrow a chicken if they run free and nobody would know the difference. Skunk got it. But a cow, a cow could really ruin a garden. And I would sit in town meeting, I remember when I was a kid, and there was 3 or 4 men that they were so opposite one another. If one said white, the other said black. And they probably liked one another very much, but not in town meeting. Not if it was spending money. And they would really get in arguments. And I mean, the arguments would last 10, 15 minutes. And it was always enjoyable to me as a kid to watch grown-ups make asses of themselves. But that was the way it was,
Were you witness to the meeting in which the argument over fencing the cemetery occurred?
I can't remember. I could have been, but I didn't hardly ever miss a town meeting because they were such good entertainment. I don't remember that one.
I was told by Earl many years ago that it became quite hostile among the people as to whether it should be fenced or not.
Well, it was fenced when I was a kid.
And finally someone arose and said, I don't understand what this is about, because nobody in there can get out and nobody in here out here wants to get in. And that ended it.
Yeah. Well, my grandfather, Lonzo, had a shack. He lived in out by the cemetery, and he took care of the cemetery for a lot of years. And it was fenced in then. But
tell us how, when you were growing up, tell us about the sort of town social activities, the kinds of things everybody did.
Oh, there was a dance about once a month in the gym, and the whole family went. You danced with your father on his feet, and then when you got old enough, you danced on your own feet. Everybody danced with everybody. There was several people in town that played musical instruments. I took tap dance lessons. I took ballet lessons. I took piano lessons. I don't know why, because my mother said I had to. It was, oh God, it was terrible. I hated it. But anyhow, we had Halloween parties. The adults dressed up for Halloween, scared the out of us, We had Christmas parties. We always had a church Christmas pageant. Always had one. They had suppers. 10:30 Club had suppers. The extension had lunches. They had plays. My father he played Aaron Slick from Pumpkin Creek in a play one time when I was just little, and it was the funniest thing I ever saw in my life. And he loved it. He thought that was just the biggest thing in the world. And every time he'd come on stage, I was sitting up front, and every time he'd come on stage, he'd wink at me. And I'd giggle. And my mother would say, "Shut up." But anyhow, we swam every day that we could. We'd see how many times we could swim to Munson Island in the summer when we got bigger. In the winter time, the only thing I ever asked for Christmas was a pair of skates. Never asked for another thing. I wanted a pair of skates every year because my feet were growing every year, and we would take different places. We'd take a shovel and a broom, everyone. We'd shovel off the ice and then we'd sweep it. And if there was holes where the grass come up through, we'd cut the grass off, chisel a hole, jump up and down, it'd fill the hole full of water, and we'd leave it. And then before we left, we scraped the top off so it would be smooth. And we had a skating rink. The frog pond out the prison road was one. Behind Timmy Bacon's house, there was a gravel pit. It is a gravel pit, I assume. And Timmy would put a board across the brook. and it would flood it. And we would go up there and skate, and we would always skated on the cove. We shoveled the whole cove off, all the kids, and our parents would come too, and sweep it. And the only thing was, we had to stay out of the boathouses. Well, when our parents weren't there, we went in the boathouses. But we went up there, we'd have a big tire and fire in it, and can you imagine the fumes that come out of them tires? But anyhow, we had marshmallows, whatever, you know. We'd go up there in the morning, stay all day, skate all day long. And when we got bigger, we skated up through, you know, the boys would go with the axes or whatever, and they'd test the ice, and if the ice was good, we'd skate up. And some of the boys had sleds that had sails on them, and we'd get on them and let the wind take us up lake. It was freezing,
Yeah.
but fun, you know. And of course we fished, ice fished. I didn't really particularly care for ice fishing because I didn't like to sit still that long. But the way it is, I guess, the way it was, sometimes I wished that the physical things in town would stay that have gone. Like, when you used to come into town, you hit Balls Hill. There was the American flag and the state flag. Now you see a Budweiser sign and a thing you hang dead deer on. To me, that is something that could be changed and would be much more welcoming if the flags were still there. But I guess the state doesn't want the flagpole anymore. So that's the way it goes. But this town was dry for so long.
Tell us about that.
Well, this was called a vanilla town. Everybody drank vanilla because they couldn't get below to get the beer. You know, so they finally got it wet, and they still drank vanilla because they didn't like the taste of the beer. It's what you get used to, I guess. You know, we had one guy that used to live in the parsonage. The kids called him Lemon Lip because he only drank lemon extract. He'd send the kids to the store to buy him lemon extract. You know, I tried vanilla. And I tried lemon extract. So my kid, when he was growing up, I said, "You drank any beer?" And he goes, "Yeah, I've had a taste or two." I said, "How about vanilla?" "Oh God, Ma," he says, "vanilla's terrible." I said, "Good, you keep it that way."
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's me or the communication of people is gone in this town. Even when I come home when I was still working away and my contract hadn't expired, when I come home after my dad died, it was like you could say go to hell to somebody and they'd smile at you because they knew exactly what you meant. If you say it to somebody now, they get very offended. And it's not something to be offended by, but it is to the outside world. It's just the communication of, maybe it wasn't words that we communicated with. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. Maybe it was a generational gene or something that I could say something and you knew exactly what I meant, only I didn't say exactly what I meant. And it was a way of being close but not being mushy. I think that's probably what I mean, but I don't know. Started out as a school board member, then I was school board chairman, then I was chairman of the rec department, and then I was third assessor, and then second assessor, and first assessor. I didn't start at the top. I started at the bottom. And all that time I was taking courses, going to school. You know, when I got 70, I was working on my bachelor's for governmental administration. And when I hit 70 years old, I said, cut it out, Sophie. Just cut it out. So, you know, I said, you got enough. But then I did take a course in religion, just for something to do.
You need to talk to this gentleman,
Oh,
because that's what he's doing now.
oh really?
I'm finishing one up, yes, yeah. In Boston, yeah, that's what I've been doing for the last number of years, yeah.
I've taken, over the years, I've taken 4 or 5. I took one in Eastern Orthodox, and I took one on what the Russian Orthodox Church relationship to the government, which was kind of funny because I didn't like the guy that did the professor. He was, I don't think he knew his subject as well as he should have. So I never finished it because it got really, but I do find it interesting. And I think the rites are so interesting in the history behind what the rites mean and whatnot. Of course, I can't remember half of it now, but
That was actually a question I was wondering about too that no one else has really been able to speak about. Really, is the kind of what like religious life in town was like, if there was much of that.
oh well, in 1903, the women in town started raising money for a church, and within 2 years, we had a Union Congregational Church, which is the church there. Everybody went to church every Sunday. All the kids went to Sunday school. I taught Sunday school, maybe 4 or 5 years. We were all baptized in the church. And after I got married, I married a Catholic. Whoopie-doo. So I went to church a couple Sundays after I got married. And this lady turned around and said to me, "What are you doing here? You married a Catholic." And I looked her in the face. I said, "Good Christian, are you?" And walked out. And I never went back to church for quite a number of years. She died. After she died, I went back. But that was my loss, not hers. But it just rankled me something fierce. You know, we had deacons of the church. Some of them were what you could say not good people, which turned away a lot of people from the church. We always had student ministers. We had some really good student ministers. Of course, we run them ragged, because they always had a church school in the summer where we did crafts and, you know, did a Bible verse, whatever, but mostly we just made fun of the minister. Cruel kids. But they were young, and when you got older, they was kind of good looking, some of them, you know. Oh, the Sutherland store. I loved that store. I used to go with Uncle Eck, and I would go in the door, run right up the stairs, and just go along, and I got in the middle of where the railing was. I'd sit down, and I'd hug the logs on both sides and lean over and look down. It was marvelous. I loved that store. It had pickle barrels and cracker barrels, and I think it was dried fruit, maybe apples. I don't know for sure right now. But I remember buying bulk dates from my mother there. Had a fancy register, really fancy register. It was all gold colored, lettering on it and everything. It had a lot of keys, but I never got around the counter to see what it actually looked like because I was too little. The smell was absolutely, I loved, and I can still remember it. They had dances in the end of it. I don't remember going to a dance there, but I remember my mother and father saying that they had dances there. It was Bob Sutherland. I don't think he ever took a bath, but that's neither here nor there. That was him. I liked his hat. He had a little hat that he wore. He looked like Santa Claus. Built, round, not too long legs, as I remember.
That's right.
I can't think of. I loved the porch on the front of it. We used to sit on the railing and watch the ball games. We used to race back and forth until we were told to stop. Had wide front steps. And the men used to sit on there and yak, and you'd have to weave through them to get in sometimes. It was a post office too at one time, until, I don't know if it was before or after the post office that was down by Eben Elsmore's house. I would say it was after that one. Yeah, I think it was after that one, because the one that was down by Eben Elsmore's house was, Will Hoare had a store there and a post office. And then the post office was in Sutherland's store, which was built in the same place that Elsmore's store was that burned. And then I think Wilhor made a little store across the street from Sutherland's. I think that's the order of it. It could be different, but I think that's the way it goes. And then when Bob Sutherland got old and didn't have the store anymore, Paul built the brick store that's there now, and he bought the property where Sutherland's store was. And they tore it down while I was away working and going to school. I have a check, a canceled check, that I found in the middle of the ball diamond, actually, after they tore the place down. That I have it someplace. I can't remember what I did with it. I just thought about it right down. But that store was, it was priceless to go in there for a kid, you know. And it wasn't like the company store or the Ellsmore store. See, women could only go to the store between 9 and 11. That was the only time the women were allowed in the store until Bob Sutherland's store. And then they were allowed to go anytime.
I didn't know that.
And that was a holdover from the tannery. Yeah, 9 to 11. That was the women's time. God forbid that you had have anything before that or after that. You'd have to send your little boy or your husband to get it. Oh, that, you know, that just fries me. No end that women put up with that crap. Well, when you were here before, I talked about myself and my family, which was kind of boring actually, but I didn't talk about anybody else on Tough End. And there was 30-some kids on this street when I was growing up, starting with the Whitings. There was Warren and Maxine, his wife, and Nye and Helena and Kenny. And then there was Carter and Agnes, who Agnes taught me how to play the piano, which I never learned to read a note. And they run the camps. And then there was Ginny and Gloria, or Bill and Annie's girls that lived, and they were my cousins. In the house that was, where my house is now, was Grammy's house, Grammy Chambers' house. And Aunt Jenny and her husband, Eddie White, lived with Grammy. And then there was myself, my mother and father, and Anna, my sister, and her son Mike. And then next door was Pauline and Chester White and George and Helen, their kids. And then across the street was Uncle X and Aunt Lil's house. And Eckie was Alexander Gullivan Chambers. And everybody called him Eckie. And he was in the First World War in the Canadian Navy and the American Navy. Because he was born in Canada, and he quick way to citizenship was to go in the service, American service. So he did. And he was the only Chambers that was in the service. They all were 4F. And Alexander Booty, who was Angus Jr., his brother, and Benjamin Franklin Chambers, all were born in Canada. And all on that draft things for the service, they were born in the United States. So it was easy to say you were born in the United States. Half of Grand Lake of that generation from 1890 to 1900 that was born in Canada and came to the United States And if they had an American parent, they said they were born in America. You know, there was numerous people in this town that were never citizens because they were born in Canada, but they were born in the United States. So anyhow, and then next door to them was Kay and Larry Milligan, which had Roger, Johnny, Mike, and Kathy. And then across the street was Bumper, George Bagley. Boy, could that man swear. Oh, he really could do the curses. Not against the Lord, just curses. Not religious curses, just down to earth curses. And he could make anything. He made all the boys bobsleds, like little miniature bobsleds that we could slide on that were like the loggers used to haul the logs on in the woods. And he made me a sled. He made me a paddle. He gave me a bowl this big that he had turned, and I gave it to his daughter. I gave it to Kay.
Yeah.
And he made snowshoes. And Daddy and Seth Brown were his snowshoe testers. He had a contract with the Army to make snowshoes. And Kay and Evie and Lula, the daughters, strung the snowshoes. They weaved the hide for the snowshoes. And Daddy and Seth Brown tested the snowshoes on that trap line, which went from upper Cecilodopsis all the way below Route 9 in the lower Chain Lakes. That was a hell of a trap line.
Absolutely.
So then the next house was Bonus's, which was Techie and Earl, Janice, Florence, Tommy, and Alan. And we used to slide down that chicken house hill, and many's the time there was cars went in the snowbank because we went across the road and they didn't want to run us over. But the lilacs that are still down there was a place we started up the chicken house and come down. We had to go around the well curb to make it through the slot between the lilac trees. Sometimes you didn't make it. A lot of us had bloody lips and whatnot. But it was fun. And then Earl had a big garden where the lawn is now. Huge garden. And next to the house, he had rows of peas. Well, being little people, we could get in on our back and just push ourselves up the row of peas and eat our heart's content of the peas. And he never could figure out how come he never got some peas. And we ate them. And we'd steal his cucumbers. And so finally, out in the back field next to Ripley Brook, he had a garden. And he'd plant squash and turnip and carrots and, stuff kids didn't like. But he would put in extra cucumbers in amongst the squash so he would have cucumbers and he could make pickles, because we'd steal like mad out of his garden. I cannot remember any of us playing in the river except at the dam, and we'd swim down to the sandbar. And we'd take baths in the river, but we never, from there on down, I can never remember us playing in the river. We went down tough end. We followed the forestry line down till the cutoff to the pugs. We'd go trouting down the pugs. We'd go hunting down to the pine knolls. And once in a while we'd go up the river drivers trail. We'd go down to the big eddy or the little eddy, you know, just to see what was going on, because they were nosy. But to play in the river, no.